Hello everyone, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So today we have to talk about copula. So today we will actually define what is copula. For that we will first define what is subcopula, and then from subcopula we will take copula as a special case. Okay. So let me first write down definition of subcopula. What is a subcopula? So as I said, we will be talking in terms of two dimension only, but whatever we do here for two dimension, most of it is directly applicable for higher dimension. Okay. A two dimensional subcopula is a function c prime. Okay, we denote it by c prime generally. Is a function c prime with following properties. So what are those properties? So we have defined a few terms till yesterday, so we'll be using those terms here. First, domain of C prime is S1 cross S2, where S1 and S2 are subsets of I containing 0 and 1. Let me complete the definition and then we'll discuss each point. Okay, containing 0 and 1. Second point is C prime is grounded and 2 increasing. So C prime is grounded and 2 increasing. So we have defined these terms, grounded and 2 increasing. And third point is, for every U in S1 and V in S2, C prime U1 is U and C prime 1V is V. Okay, C prime U1 is U, means if one of the arguments is 1, then you get the first argument back as the output, and C prime 1V is V, and this actually gives us something else. So what yesterday we saw one lemma. What was the statement? Can anyone recall? Can anyone recall the statement of yesterday's lemma? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible. Ma'am, which one? Like there were two.
The second one.
Okay, so let S1, S2 be non-empty subsets of R bar, and let H be a grounded 2 increasing function with domain S1 cross S2. Then H is non-decreasing in each argument.
Correct. So if we have grounded to increasing function, then it becomes non-decreasing in individual arguments also. And here we are saying C prime is grounded and 2 increasing. So this automatically implies that C prime is increasing in individual arguments also. Okay. So using all these properties, we can prove that C prime UV is between 0 and 1. That is, which is same as saying that range of C prime is subset of I. So can you see why that would be the case? Can you see why C prime UV would be between 0 and 1? Anyone? I can hear someone shuffling through the pages. Yes, anyone? Okay, what is meant by C prime being grounded? What is the definition of groundedness?
Ma'am, if either of the element is smallest element, then the result is 0.
Correct. So currently our domain of C prime is S1 cross S2, where S1, S2 are subsets of I. Okay, means they are subsets of unit intervals. And in addition to that, we have put a condition that the subsets should contain 0 and 1. What does it mean? That this is suppose 0, this is 1. You can't have S1 as this part only. That is not allowed. You can have this part plus this point as S1. That is allowed. So S1 need not be connected. S1 can be disconnected, but 0 and 1 have to be there. Okay, that is the condition. That is the condition in our definition. So because 0 and 1 are always there, 0 would always be the smallest element of the domain and 1 would always be the largest element of the domain. Okay, am I still audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so now this means so C prime is grounded means C prime 0 V is same as C prime U 0 and all these are 0 for every UV in domain of, so I should ideally write for every U in S1 and for every V in S2. Okay so far?
Yes, ma'am.
So this is definition of groundedness, and we saw in yesterday's lemma that if a function is grounded and 2 increasing, then it is increasing in the individual arguments also. Therefore, for any u in S1, C prime 0v will be less than or equal to C prime uv, because the function is increasing in the first argument. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And this we saw is equal to 0. So C prime uv is always greater than or equal to 0. Okay. This is for every u, and same argument I can apply for v. Okay. And now we have this condition for every u in S1 and v in S2, C prime u1 is u. So we will use that. C prime u1 is equal to u for every u in S1. Again, because the function is increasing in individual arguments, I can write C prime u1 is less than or equal to C prime 1 1 for every u in S1, because 1 is the largest possible element. Okay. And in general, I can also write C prime uv is less than or equal to C prime u1, because v is always less than or equal to 1, so it is increasing in v also. Assuming you are awake and listening and following, C prime uv would be less than or equal to u, which is less than or equal to 1. So C prime uv will always be less than or equal to 1. Is it correct, or have I made some mistake?
No, ma'am, it's correct.
So what I have used? So here I have used increasing in v, increasing in second argument. So v is less than or equal to 1, so C prime uv is less than or equal to C prime u1. And here I have used increasing in first argument. So what we have proved, 0 is less than equal to C prime UV and C prime UV is less than equal to 1. That is this, we have proved this. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is definition of subcopula. Basically these three properties. This can be derived as a result of the earlier three properties. And from subcopula now we have to define two-dimensional copula. So two-dimensional copula is a two-dimensional subcopula whose domain is I2, whose domain is I2. Okay. So the only difference in copula and subcopula is, here I was saying that we can have any S1 and S2 and then S1 cross S2 will be domain. S1 and S2 are subsets of I. So they could be proper subsets also, provided that they contain 0 and 1. However, if I allow S1 and S2 to be only I, not any other subset, then that function becomes two-dimensional copula. Okay. That's the only difference between copula and subcopula, the domain. So if in exam you are asked to write definition of copula, ideally you should write this definition, just replace S1 and S2 by I. Got it? Don't write just this line. Okay, you should write this entire thing with S1 and S2 replaced by I. Okay. So in general, if I want to list again properties of copula, then copula C, so subcopula is denoted by C prime, copula is denoted by C. So C is a function from I2 to I, correct? Its domain is I2 and it is range is I, because we already proved that range of subcopula is I and copula is also a subcopula. So its range is I, and the properties that it has is, for every UV in I, CU0 would be 0 and it is same as C0V because of the groundedness in the definition, and then CU1 would be U because of the other property, and C1V would be V. Okay. And because of the two increasingness, for every U1 less than or equal to U2 and for every V1 less than or equal to V2, where U1, U2, V1, V2 all are in what do you call I will have C U2 V2 minus C U2 V1 minus C U1 V2 plus C U1 V1 to be greater than or equal to 0. Why? Because we have said that this is two increasing function, correct? In the definition of subcopula we said that it is grounded and two increasing. Okay, so far?
Yes, ma'am.
Sometimes I feel I should assign at the beginning of the class, every class I should assign a person who is supposed to respond, because I think everyone thinks that the other person will respond and then in the end nobody responds. Next semester probably we can try something like that. Okay, so now we have to see couple more properties, basic properties of copula, subcopula, etc. So let me write down a theorem. which gives bounds on values of the copula, actually subcopula to be precise. Okay, so let C prime be a subcopula, C prime be a subcopula, then for every uv in domain of C prime, we have this property, that is we have this inequality, maximum of u plus v minus 1 comma 0 is less than or equal to C prime uv is less than or equal to minimum of uv. So basically we are giving lower and upper bounds on the value of subcopula. Okay, so we have two functions. One is maximum of u plus v minus 1 comma 0 and other is minimum of uv, and we are saying that these provide bounds for subcopula. So first let us try to prove this, and then I'm going to give you some homework also. So let us try to prove this first. So what all do you know about subcopula? We know C prime uv is equal to okay, wait, I can write directly. So we have revised twice. So C prime u1 is equal to u, correct? C prime u1 is equal to u. Then we know C prime 1v is equal to v. Okay, and we said just now C prime uv will be less than or equal to C prime u1 because the function is increasing in the second argument, and this is u, correct? Similarly, C prime uv will be less than or equal to C prime 1v, which is v. Here I am using the fact that the function is increasing in the first argument. Okay, so basically C prime uv is less than u and it is less than v also. It is less than both of them. Therefore, C prime uv is less than or equal to minimum of u and v. Because it is less than both of them, it is less than the smallest of them. Okay, I hope my u and v are identifiable, distinguishable. Okay, so actually we have already proved one part of this inequality, the second half of the inequality. We have to now worry about the first half. For that we will talk about H volume. So here with respect to copula, so it will be kind of like C volume. So I will consider rectangle u1 and v1. Okay, we have a condition that 1 and 0 should always be in the domain. So that condition is needed here, because if I don't know whether 1 is in the domain, then I can't compute C volume, because for computing C volume we need all 4 vertices to be in the domain, correct? So what would this be? This would be C prime 1 1 minus C prime u1 minus C prime 1v plus C prime uv, correct? U is less than or equal to 1, v is less than or equal to 1. So I am just writing definition of C volume or H volume. What is C prime 1 1? It is 1. What is C prime u1? What is C prime u1?
U.
U. This is v, and this is just C prime uv. I don't know anything about it. What we know is because the function is 2 increasing, this has to be greater than or equal to 0 for every uv in the domain of C prime. Correct? The function is 2 increasing. So what I have is 1 minus u minus v plus C prime uv is greater than or equal to 0. Therefore C prime uv is greater than or equal to u plus v minus 1. And I think that's exactly what we wanted. Yeah, u plus v minus 1. And of course we know, we have already proved that C prime uv is greater than or equal to 0. So C prime uv is greater than or equal to maximum of u plus v minus 1 and 0, because it is greater than or equal to both of them. Zero. Therefore C prime uv is greater than or equal to maximum of u plus v minus 1 comma 0. Okay, so we have proved that these two can be taken as bounds, and in fact they have a name. So these are called as Fréchet-Hofding bounds. Okay, so this, and they have some notation also, so let me write down the notation. So you write MUV as minimum of UV. So this is called as Fréchet-Hofding upper bound. Upper bound for copula. And the other one is denoted generally by W. So WUV is maximum of u plus v minus 1 comma 0. So this is known as Fréchet-Hofding lower bound for copula. Okay. Okay, so as I said, now I have homework for you. Homework is to prove that both these, so MUV and WUV, are also copula. You have to prove this. So if you have to prove that they are copulas, what all you will do? You have to prove that their domain is I2 and then they are grounded. This property is satisfied, CUV equal CU1 equal to U, etc., and that they are 2 increasing. Okay, so you have to prove that these two functions fulfill all these requirements. Is it okay? So
ma'am, can you please scroll up?
yes.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, so now so yeah, you have now at least two copulas, concrete examples of copula in front of you. So if you have UV coming from I2, I mean UV individually coming from I, then minimum of UV is a copula. Similarly, maximum of u plus v minus 1 comma 0 is another copula. And let me give you one more example of copula, so that could also be homework. So product copula, there is something called as product copula. What is product copula? Pi uv is defined as u into v. Okay, so again you have homework. Prove that this is copula. So prove that this satisfies all the properties. Okay, so you have three concrete examples of copula function. Of course, you should try and look for some other examples also. We can probably see one or two examples. So with this background, now we want to state one of the important results related to copula, which is known as Sklar's theorem. Okay, so let me again state the result first and then we'll discuss. Let H be a joint distribution function. Let H be a joint distribution function with margins f and g. Okay, h be a joint distribution function with margins f and g, then there exists a copula C, such that for every xy in R bar, hxy is C fx gy. I told you that copula is basically supposed to connect joint distribution to its marginals, so this is how it should connect. So joint distribution should be written, we should be able to write joint distribution as C of, that is copula of fx and gy, the marginal CDFs. Okay, so let me call this star because we are going to need it later. Statement is not complete yet. If f and g are continuous, then C is unique. Okay, if f and g are continuous, then C is unique. Otherwise, C is uniquely determined on range of f cross range of g. The statement is still not complete, it's a big statement. Conversely, if C is a copula and f and g are distribution functions, by the way, whenever I say distribution functions, I mean CDFs. So if C is a copula and f and g are distribution functions, then H defined by star is a joint distribution function with marginals f and g, okay. Okay, the statement is complete. So what all are we saying? So the first part says that suppose we start with three distribution functions. One of them is a bivariate distribution function h, and f and g are its marginals. Then irrespective of whatever distribution functions you pick, okay, so you pick any joint distribution function, compute its marginals f and g, then you can always find a copula. Copula means a function which satisfies the properties that we listed above, such that hxy is C of fxgy, which means that if values of marginal distribution functions are known at all points, then using copula you can get joint CDF at all points. Correct? Because fx is known, gy is known, and a form of C is known, then you can get hxy by computing C of fx and gy. So this guarantees that for every family of distribution functions, I don't know, like you have some joint distribution function, you have its marginals, then you can always find one copula which will connect them. Okay, so the first part says you will find at least one copula because it says there exists a copula. Then the next part says that if f and g are continuous, means if they are CDFs of a continuous random variable, then this C is unique. So not just existence but uniqueness is also there. But sometimes f and g need not be continuous. If your x and y are discrete random variables or mixed random variables, then f and g will have some mass at some points, so they won't be continuous, there will be left discontinuity. But still, in that case also, you can uniquely determine C on range of F cross range of C. Okay, so domain of C, if you take as range of F cross range of G, you can uniquely determine it. And now converse is also there, means if you have two marginal distribution functions and you want to construct some joint distribution functions from them. Okay, for example, yesterday we saw that we had one uniform -1 random variable and one standard exponential random variable, and I want to construct some joint distribution from those. So my only condition is that whatever joint distribution comes up, that distribution should have these two CDFs, that is the uniform CDF and the standard exponential CDF, as the marginals. Okay, one of course is you take product. If you assume them to be independent, you take product, you get one joint distribution function. But suppose I don't want independent, then take some copula, apply that copula to F and G, and then whatever you get, that becomes a joint distribution function. Got it? For example, here we have seen three copulas: minimum uv, maximum of u plus v minus 1, and product. So product copula will be used if I assume independence. Otherwise, what I'll do is, I'll suppose I use minimum uv. Minimum uv means what? Minimum of fx and gy would become one joint CDF. Okay, similarly maximum of fx plus gy minus 1 comma 0 becomes another CDF. Okay, so in this way, if you have a copula, you can construct joint CDFs, and you can construct like many joint CDFs from two given marginals. Okay, that is the beauty of this class theorem. Okay, and we are not going to go into the proof of class theorem. We should just understand the interpretation and meaning of it. And we have one corollary: H, F, G, C are as in Sklar's theorem. Okay, so we are not defining them again. Are as in Sklar's theorem. F and G are continuous. Then for every uv coming from domain of C, CUV is defined as H of F inverse of U and G inverse of V. Okay, try to compare this with star, then it would be clear. Okay, see, you have x here, so x I can actually write as F inverse of fx, correct? So whatever is argument of C, here argument of C was fx, so x was like F inverse of fx, so we are doing exactly that. Whatever is argument of C, we are taking F inverse of that, and for V we are taking G inverse, then CUV is H of F inverse U, G inverse V. So basically this is similar to star, but now we can define it in terms of inverse also. And for defining inverse, we need the function to be continuous, because if you have a distribution function which has mass at certain points, then it won't be a 1-1 function, and then you can't define inverse properly. Okay, so let me take one example. So we have seen only multivariate normal distribution. We didn't see any other multivariate distribution. So let me introduce one. So there is something called as Gumbel's, no double L, sorry, Gumbel's bivariate exponential. So actually for bivariate exponential there are various forms. So one of them is Gumbel's bivariate exponential distribution. So let me write down the joint CDF. So hxy is 1 minus e raised to minus x minus e raised to minus y plus e raised to minus x plus y plus theta xy, where x is greater than or equal to 0, y is greater than or equal to 0, and theta is strictly greater than okay, theta is between 0 1, not just Okay, theta is kind of like a correlation parameter. So theta is between 0 1. Okay, so and of course 0 otherwise. So this is this is CDF for Gumbel's bivariate exponential distribution, and its marginals are supposed to be standard exponential. Okay, marginals are standard univariate exponentials. Then we have to find C such that this hxy could be written as C of fx and gy, where fx and gy are CDFs of standard exponential. Okay, so what is fx? We know fx is 1 minus e raised to minus x. Similarly, gy would be 1 minus e raised to minus y. And because things are continuous, we can define x as f inverse of u. So if I, how do I do that? So 1 minus e raised to minus x we have to equate to u. So I will have 1 minus u as e raised to minus x, log of 1 minus u as minus x. So x is minus log of 1 minus u. Okay, so x is minus log of 1 minus u. Similarly, y is g inverse of v, so it is minus log of 1 minus v. So we will substitute these values of xy. So c u v is supposed to be same as hxy. So it is 1 minus e raised to minus x minus e raised to minus y plus e raised to minus x, e raised to minus y, e raised to minus theta xy. I am just separating the terms in the bracket. Okay, e raised to minus x into e raised to minus y into e raised to minus theta xy. And now for x and y we will substitute these things. So e raised to minus x would actually be 1 minus u, correct? So I have 1 minus u. E raised to minus y would be 1 minus v plus, so this is 1 minus u, 1 minus v, and this is e raised to minus theta. X into y would be log 1 minus u into log 1 minus v. Minus minus will become plus. By the way, when I write log, I mean natural log. Whenever I write log, I mean natural log. Log 1 minus u, log 1 minus v. Okay, so this is the copula. We can try to simplify. Can I cancel something? 1 minus 1 I can cancel, and so on. So I'll be left with u plus v minus 1 plus 1 minus u, 1 minus v, e raised to minus theta, log of 1 minus u, and log of 1 minus v. Okay, you can verify that the function is grounded and 2 increasing. So basically what does this mean? This means that if I know u and v, that is if I know marginal CDFs, then I can compute joint CDF at that point by substituting those marginal CDFs here, okay, in place of u and v. Is it okay? So suppose I want marginal CDF at joint CDF at 1 2, then what I'll do is u I will substitute as 1 minus e raised to minus 1, v I will substitute as 1 minus e raised to minus 2. I can compute these values, then I'll get uv, and then I substitute those uv here, and whatever value I get for cuv with these substitutions will become joint CDF at 1 2. Okay, so this is how copula can connect your marginal CDFs to joint CDFs, and it has lot of applications, for example in say finance and all, because this gives you a power of constructing many joint distributions from given two marginals, because you plug in any copula you use those marginals in that copula and you get a new joint distribution function. So you can construct many bivariate or multivariate distributions from given two marginals. Okay, so that's why this is pretty new topic actually. Copula was discovered relatively quite late, but it has now become quite a hot topic. Many people are doing research in it and it has found lot of applications in various areas. Okay, so I think this is all I want to discuss about copula stuff, so I will stop today. Any doubts?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am, one, it might be a silly doubt, but do we use copulas in discrete cases as well? Like
Yes, yes,
here
yes.
we are
Yes, yes. That's why we in Slash theorem we specified that if it's continuous, then yes, we get something extra. But yes, in discrete case also we can use copula.
okay, ma'am.
In fact, even if you want a mixture, like if you want one discrete and one continuous marginal, still you can use copula.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, let me stop. Thank you.